This conference will now be recorded.
All right, yes. Any questions, guys? Anyone? Any questions still here that I can take? Anyone? Any questions?
Good
Done?
morning, Abhishek. Ranjit here.
Go ahead, Ranjit, please.
Okay. Whenever we try to add that SQL project, we are getting an error of unable to find package bootstrap. That
Okay, unable to find
NU110.
packages. Okay, okay. Good that you tried. Let's see. So, firstly, did you try to Google it out? To
Yes.
understand what the error is.
Ye-
So,
So
any
I was a
solutions
bit
that you got to Google?
confused.
Okay.
I, I
Mm-hmm.
did try it with using the tools and go to
Okay.
the NuGet package manager, and under
Mm-hmm.
that I tried to clear all the NuGet cache files.
Okay. Okay.
So
Guess so.
and
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Sure.
And again,
So,
I tried to do the update
okay.
that file as well. Still,
Okay.
it's not
So,
doing the same thing.
sure. I'm sending this across. This is the documentation that will help you resolve this particular error. So, whenever
Sure.
anyone gets that particular error while building the SQL application, it is because of the packages that are unavailable. So, the project doesn't come with, let's say, pre-built packages out here. So, what you got to do is that you'll have to first go into your Visual Studio console, and when you find this particular SQL application, right, just do a right click there, say manage NuGet packages, and once you're there inside the manage NuGet packages, here you'll find something called as a settings button. So just go here, click on the setting button out there, and once inside that, just say in the package source, just say add a package source. It's going to give you what is the name of the package and what is the source. I have given what is the name and what is the source. Just add this out and just say okay, and then try to build this out. This will help you out to build the application. You will be depending upon NuGet package source, which is, let's say, something called NuGet.org. So once this is done, that error should go and you should be able to build your application and deploy your application out here as such.
Okay,
So
perfect. Thank you. I'll
yes,
do that.
no problem. And guys, please follow this doc. So whenever I'm giving a documentation, please try to bookmark it somewhere. This will really help you out, let's say, in the future, so that you can go ahead and, let's say, resolve these errors out there on your own. Yes. Any more questions, guys? Anyone? Any more questions that I can take to you? Okay. So just to review our infrastructure. So this is where we are. So initially we started creating our data tier, or we lay down. Okay, let's see. Fine. We started creating our data tier out here. This is the initial setup that we went through. And after creating the data tier, I mean, as in the data tier, I went ahead created something called as a SQL server, and then we had created something called as a SQL database out here. These are the two objects, or these are the two things that we went ahead and created out here as such. After creating, sorry, after creating the data tier, we then went ahead and said that, you know what, since the data tier is good, I want to expose the data that is sitting inside my data, or my sitting inside my database, over the internet. And what I did is that then I created an application called Azure Web App, and we deployed some code here. Again, this was a code which is pre-built. We haven't written this code out here. We built this code and we deployed it into, let's say, that particular SQL server, or inside that particular SQL database out here. Sorry, we deployed this code into the app service out here, and finally, we established a connection between the Azure Web App and the SQL database in the form of a connection string, form of something called as a connection string out here as such. And then when we browse the application, we were able to browse the application and we were able to get the data over a website. So as a user, if you're going inside this particular, or if you're going ahead and, let's say, interacting with this particular app service over something called www some website name dot azure websites.net, it's able to get to this particular app service, and as and when it is requesting this particular app service, the app service is understanding that it needs to go into this particular SQL database by using this particular connection string, and it's just going into the SQL, running a query, getting all the data, and sending it out to you out here on your browser. And that's how you're able to see, let's say, all the data that is getting displayed out here as such. So this is the end-to-end flow that we have established. But at the end, what we did is that I also said that being a DevOps engineer, you should also take care of something called as security of an organization. I said, you know what, we will have to take care of something called as security of a particular organization out here. And then we went ahead and finally added something called as a virtual network. So if you go inside my SQL server out here, if I go inside the networking, we have added a virtual network rule telling that only the resources or people within this particular virtual network that I have created will have the access or should have the access to this particular SQL server and to the data inside the SQL server out here, which means that, see, I'm a today I am a user who's coming from a public IP address. So if I now go inside my sorry, if I now go inside my databases and try to establish a connection to my database, I'll just go and say 001. It'll simply say this particular error telling that your IP is not whitelisted, and that is how it's supposed to throw the error out here. Reason being, I'm a user who's trying to, let's say, I'm a user going to the backend, going inside, let's say, this particular SQL database from an internet traffic. So I'm coming from the internet, but all my connections are being blocked by this particular wall or imaginary wall out here that is established, or that basically is established by a virtual network out here. So a virtual network is throwing away all my requests back. The reason being, I am a user who's outside the network. Now, what normally we do in a real-time environment is that we go ahead, create a virtual machine inside the same network. This is where VMs come into picture, and these these VMs that you create are called jump servers. Which means that as a user, right, you can connect to this particular VM over a private IP address, provided you have a VPN. So if you have a VPN good enough, you can go ahead, jump onto this particular virtual machine over a VPN connection. And once you are inside a VPN connection, and once you are inside, let's say, this particular virtual machine, you can simply go ahead into the Azure portal from this particular virtual machine and try to talk to this particular SQL server. It is allowed. Reason being, your virtual machine and this particular SQL server are sitting in the same virtual network. If resources are within the same virtual network, the communication between them is freely allowed. Reason being, your network security group rule doesn't restrict traffic within the network out here. This is what we normally do out here, meaning when an interviewer asks you is that, you know what, I have a SQL server, I have a couple of developers who wants to get access to that particular SQL server. How do you provision it, or how is the security taken care in your organization? You can give this as one of the example, telling that you have created, let's say, a virtual machine in the same network as a SQL server is, and once you have the virtual machine there, you can, kind of log into that particular virtual machine and then go into the SQL and establish a connection out here as such. This is something that you can tell out here as such. Yes, any questions here? Any questions on what I have explained till now? Anyone? Any questions till here? Okay, so think about this. I, as a user, I'm not able to, let's say, go ahead and log into the SQL server or into the SQL database. Reason being, I have a virtual network in place. And since I have a virtual network in place, I'm telling that, you know what, you can create sorry, you can create a virtual machine and then log into the virtual machine and then go ahead and let's say talk to the SQL server out here as such. Good enough. I have unblocked my users. My users will now be able to log into the machine, then be able to let's say establish connections, then be able to interact with the data. They'll be able to do whatever they were able to do earlier also. But then what about my application? My application is making an internet call, right? My web app that I've created is outside the virtual network. The web app I created is outside the virtual network out here, outside the boundaries of the virtual network. Don't you not think that even the web app will at some point face an issue in establishing a connection with the SQL? The reason being, you have a firewall kind of a thing that is placed out here, which is denying the traffic, meaning it will hit here and the connection will bounce back. The reason being, the web app is also making a call from the internet, which means I secured my application, meaning I secured my data tier. But what I did out here while securing the data tier is that I broke the connection between the front end tier and the back end, because my web application is a resource who's not sitting in the same virtual network as my SQL server is, which means my connection, meaning which means my web application will not be able to establish a proper connection with my SQL server out here. Then what do you think that I should do in this particular, let's say, architecture? What do you think, or what do you all think that I should improve here in order to make sure my application works, but I cannot remove my security right now? So can anyone give me a suggestion here?
Load balancer.
Load balancer, but how will a load balancer really help?
It has some public IP address. It will connect it to
Okay,
the
good point.
network.
Load balancer, it has a public IP address which can get connected and all these things. But how will I add a web app to my load balancer? Reason being, a load balancer will only support virtual machines and something called as
Okay.
virtual machine scale sets out there. You cannot add a web application, or you cannot
Mm-hmm.
add an Azure. You cannot add, let's say, an Azure SQL database out here into your load balancer backend.
Right.
Right. So a VPN. But how will a VPN help here? VPN will help a user like you, me. VPN will help a user. You can install a VPN on my laptop, and using a VPN, I can get connected with that particular SQL database. I can establish a connection. I can grab my data and all these things out. But how will you establish, or how will you install a VPN on a web app? Because this is a platform as a service, and it doesn't give you a lot of control in the background.
Mm.
Is any more thoughts here, guys? Firstly, I don't even want you all to give a solution, but I just want to understand. I just want you all to understand the question that we have, or the problem that we have right now. If you understand the problem, the solution is half there in front of you. So I just want you all to think about it. Think about the architecture that we have designed and what is the issue with this particular architecture out here. Yes, any thoughts here, guys? Did everyone understand the question? Is anyone having issue with sorry, is anyone having issue in following the question? Yes, any
I get.
thoughts? Good, please. Anyone, any thoughts here, guys? Firstly, did everyone understand the question? Yes, no?
I understand.
Anyone who's yes? Anyone who did not understand the question?
Could you repeat it again?
Sure, I can repeat it again. We have put a virtual network on our backend applications like a SQL server and a SQL database. Now, what happens if you put a virtual network? If you put a virtual network, it will isolate your backend resources. But my front-end resource, which is a web application, is someone who's not within the network, which means that my web application is making an internet call to this particular SQL to this particular SQL, and the virtual network will deny these calls. The virtual network will simply bounce back all these calls out here. It'll simply say that, you know what, I don't understand what you're really talking about, so I'll simply bounce back all these calls out here as such. Now, in this context, what I want you all to think about is that, is that how do you make sure that your web app has the access to the SQL, but you cannot remove the virtual network here. You cannot remove the virtual network. Reason being, you got the virtual network in place because of a security or because of establishing a security for your organization right now. So, what would be the solution here? Can anyone think of any solution about this?
Sir, I'm not sure, but
Mhm.
can we create a virtual network gateway between
Virtual network gateway. Again, virtual network gateway is from an on-premise connection. For example, a
okay.
VPN will use a virtual network gateway. So you could have created a VPN, provided this is
Mhm.
not a web app but a virtual machine. You could have done that.
Okay.
But since it's not a virtual machine, you do not have a control to go ahead and install a gateway or to go ahead and install the VPN software.
Sir, there is any role assignment?
Any role assignment? Yes, I can do a role assignment. But again, even if I do a role assignment, it will just bypass the connection string. The role assignment is to just go ahead and give the web app a permission to log inside the SQL server. It is also able to do with the connection string right now. The issue is not with the role assignments. The issue is with the firewall that is coming into place between my front end and the back end.
The virtual
Now the
network peering,
sorry, can virtual network peering, but
yeah.
which virtual network would you peer here? I only have one virtual network here.
We place the tab service in another virtual network and connect to that.
Exactly. Great question, great point. But again, when you place the app service inside the virtual network, the point here I'm trying to suggest is that I don't want to create a new virtual network in the first place. What what if I bring my app service within this particular virtual network? What if I do that? Can I do that? Definitely. If I'm able to do this, that itself is my solution. If I'm able to just go ahead, I'll just remove all these things out to avoid confusion. If I'm able to do this one, my app service and the SQL server right now, both will be within the same network and the connection will freely flow. There's something that there's just something that I don't have to do. So I just need to take the virtual network, or I just need to take the app service and get it inside the virtual network out here. This this is called Azure App Service VNet integration. That's the concept that I actually want to go into. Azure App Service Virtual Network Integration, which means that if I go inside my app service, so if I go inside the resource groups, if I go into the application tier, this is the app service that I have. If I go inside the app service and if I look for something called networking, I have a networking. Remember, we also had this option. Sorry, we also had this option while creating the app service out here. What I'll say networking, and there is a concept here called outbound call, inside which there is something called as a virtual network integration, VNet integration, which is grayed out right now. Sorry, and the reason this is grayed out right now is because I'm using a free app service plan. The plan that I'm using is a free plan which will not support virtual network integrations. So what I'll do is I'll click on this one. I'll change the app service plan. So I'll say scale up. So I'm scaling up my app service plan into something called S1, into a production tier called S1 out here as such. So I'm scaling up this particular plan. I'm getting it to a higher capacity called S1, which will support something called as a virtual network integration out here. So it doesn't really say, but it does support something called virtual network integration. So just come here, just say networking. Now let's now let's see the outbound traffic. It's telling set up calls to dependencies like databases, and I have something called as a virtual network integration. I'll go here, and in here I will say add a VNet. It's telling no VNets found. Let's see. I have one VNet here, which is called demo VNet East US2. I'll take the same subnet and I'll say OK. What I'm now doing is I'm just taking the VNet and I'm attaching it to the app service, and I'm getting the app service inside the scope of a VNet so that it can freely talk to the database and the calls are secure. Now, whatever call your app service makes to your SQL database is within the range of your virtual network only. All these calls are intranet calls. It's not an internet, it's an intranet. It's an intranet call it is making, which is much more secure out here than an internet call. Now, if you check this out, let's go back. And now it's telling VNet is configured, and there is something called routers enabled, which means that all the calls that the app service is actually making is going through this particular virtual network and then communicating to my database. A level up of a security that I have established inside the organization out here, wherein I've just told that I've done something called as a virtual network integration out here as such. Yes, any questions? I'll take a quick pause. Any questions here? Is everyone able to follow this?
Sir,
Go
uh,
ahead, please.
then how the outside user from internet traffic first
Great
of all will
question.
connect to the that
App
web
service
app
application. Great question.
application?
Let's do that. The question here is that how will I, as an outside user, meaning I'm a student of this particular institute, and the website is itself created for me. So how will I, as an outside user, be able to connect to this? Because the app service is inside the virtual network out here. So if the app service is inside the virtual network, will I, as a user, should I basically go into my, whenever I come into the institution, should I download a VPN onto my phone and then connect, or onto my laptop and then connect? Not really. Let's see that. Let's take the app service, or let's take the website address, and I'll just put the address here in the chat window. Let's hit this, and let's see what do we get here. Do we get an error, or what exactly do we get here out here as such? I'm able to get the same content. I'm able to get this without I do anything. I still am able to get this. But yes, you're right. Ideally, I shouldn't get this particular website at all. I I should just get some error out here because the website is now sitting inside the virtual network. But again, let's review the concept once again. When I integrated the virtual network, I am not blocking the inbound calls. Inbound call or inbound traffic is all the requests that you as a user send to that particular web application. you are not securing the inbound connection, which means that the application is somewhat like this. It is not completely private. It has still one leg, or it has still one portion of it sitting on the internet, listening to the internet, but one leg, the other leg of it, sitting inside the network, so that it is allowing you to make a call to this particular app service. You're still able to make a call. Sorry, you're still able to make a call to this particular app service. Still able to grab all that particular data, and still able to look into that particular data securely. But this is not blocking you because you have secured the outbound call. When I say outbound, all the requests that this particular web application is making to resources like a storage account, to resources like a database out here as such. So VNet integration is for outbound secure, or it's for outbound call securing and not inbound call securing. And that's the reason you as a user who's coming from the internet will not even have an impact. You will not even know what is happening in the background. But in the background, all your calls are processed by this particular app service. It's taken into the network. Then it makes a call to the SQL server. SQL server authenticates firstly using the connection string, and then that call goes to the database. It grabs all the data from the database and sends it across over the internet out here as such. This is what is happening as an end-to-end flow. Does this answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Any questions? Any more questions here, guys? Anyone? Any more questions here? Now, let's say, just for the argument's sake, let's say that I don't want this application to be internet application. I want this application to be intranet application, which means I want to completely secure my app service as well. Which means you as a user from the outside world should not be able to talk to this particular app service. This is only for my users internally. For example, let's say this is not a list of courses. This is a list of patients in a hospital. Now I cannot expose this particular list to the outside world, right? I cannot do this because this is data privacy issue. I cannot publish it over the internet. So my organization is now telling me that please make this as an intranet application and not an internet application, which means you as a user coming from an internet should be blocked, but I as a user who's inside the network, when I say inside the network, I can be inside my office, or I can have a VPN connection established, anything, I should be able to talk to this particular web application freely, meaning only users within the network of the organization. In order to achieve this, you will have to look at something called as inbound traffic, because all these are inbound calls that you are making to this particular app service. And there is a concept called access restrictions, meaning whom do you want to restrict. So let's see, I'll say access restrictions here, and by default, since this is being a PaaS service, I have a priority called, let's say something like this, telling allow everything, please go ahead, allow everything. Let's say I don't want to do this, I only want to allow my virtual network to make a call to this particular app service. I want to make this an internet application. I'll say add rule. I'll say vnet rule, some rule name. I'll say allow. I'll say priority is 1. Say this is securing app service, and I'll say this is a virtual network. Source setting, I'll say virtual network. I'll say this is the virtual network. I'll say add rule. So I'm taking the virtual sorry, I'm taking the virtual network, I'm adding it inside the rule here, and just see this. As and when I added a rule, Microsoft in the background added a default rule telling that, you know what, apart from this particular virtual network, deny everything. Deny everything, I don't care. Now, what is going to happen is this. Let's see. Let's wait for a second. Let's check the same app service again. Now, what I want you all to do is make a request to this particular app service once again. Click on this link, make a request. Let me know what is the message that you get, or what is something that you see at your end. Let me know what
Error
exactly that you see.
403.
Error
Eh,
403.
403
Forbidden.
for you get.
Forbidden. What is it telling you? The web app that you attempted to reach has blocked your access. Which means that you have no access out here. Reason being, you are making an internet call. You are a user who's making an internet call out here. You will definitely be denied, and this is what you will be seeing for intranet applications. This is now a pure private and intranet application out here as such. So we have used two concepts out here. One being a virtual network integration for outbound traffic to secure all the calls that are going from your app service to multiple resources. And second thing, what we did is we switched on the access restriction, and we switched on the access restrictions out here, and we said this is only now the call is only allowed from an sorry from within the virtual network out here, from within the boundary of the virtual network. So that's the reason now this is completely come inside the virtual network right now, and you as a user coming from the internet is not allowed. If you want to allow users, this user A either should be within your network out here, meaning this user should be working within the office, or that user should have a VPN established on his laptop, or the least secured option, but still I can show you, whitelist the IP of a user. This is my IP. I'll go into this one. I'll say access restrictions out here. I'll say add a rule again. I'll say my home IP. I'll give a priority called 1. I'll say IP address or IP whitelisting. I'll say instead of virtual network, I'll say it is IPv4. I'll give the IP address here. And once it's validating, I'll say add a rule. So I am now allowing myself over a public internet. I'm saying, you know what? Everyone apart from this particular IP and this particular virtual network are denied. Don't allow anyone out here. And if I come here, refresh the screen, I am able to see the list of courses. Can anyone online try this out and let me know what do you see here? In all likely, you should not be able to see, or you should be able to see the same error telling 403. Reason being, you are not allowed, I am allowed. Are you able to see the same thing, guys? Can anyone please confirm?
403 error.
403 forbidden for
403 error. Yes, it will give you a forbidden. Reason being, you are making an
Your
internet call.
IP. Yes,
Yes,
yes.
and
Got it.
my IP is whitelisted, and your IP is not. And this is how you make applications completely private. Yes, I'll take a quick pause. Any questions still here? Anyone? Any questions still here? Anyone? Any questions that I can take till here?
So, Abhishek, this is how the setup has been done in the organization through the internet portal, where we have to log in the credentials, like company credentials, so that we can only use the
Yes.
portal.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
No worries. Any more questions, you guys? Now this is where I'm coming down and integrating multiple concepts out here. So pure networking. So networking has to be super strong. And with that, I'm now integrating the PaaS services, and I'm telling how the integration really works out here as such. Yes. Any questions I can take till here? Anyone? Any more questions that I can take till here? Okay. So let's come down here. Let's make our application internet application once again. So I'll just remove the priorities here. I'll just remove this out. I'm making my sorry, I'm taking out the access restriction. I'm switching out the access restriction out here and making my application an internet application once again, so that even everyone can go ahead and let's say access this out. So it is now converted into an internet application. So I'm again getting it out here. So you as a user can simply go ahead and interact with this over the internet, and I'm good with this. So I've also showed you how to make this as a private by using access restrictions. But let's say for my use case, I want this to be an internet application right now as such. Now let's see what plan this particular app service is running on, guys. Can anyone tell me what plan this app service is really running on by just looking at this particular page?
S1.
S1.
Production. S1,
Yes,
yes.
production S1 exactly. How do we see
S1.
that? If you look at this one, it's telling S1. But with that also, you have something in the background like this. It is telling it is S1 colon 1, not just S1 out here. It's telling S1 colon 1 out here, which is telling you that, okay, fine, you know what? This app service, let's only talk about the app service right now. Let's isolate that and I'll say app service out here. So I have an app service. I have an app service plan, and this particular app service plan gives the compute power to the app service, meaning in order for the app service to process your request, it needs to have some kind of a RAM hardware and all these things. This is powered by a backend running app service plan, and an app service plan is nothing but, or an app service plan in the background is nothing but a virtual machine which you do not have any control upon. It's nothing but a VM. Good enough until you're. What is happening is that, let's say I have 10 users coming into picture. Let's say this is user into 10. There are about 10 users who are coming into picture right now. And all these 10 users sending the request. What really happens is that this request flows from the user, goes to the app service requests for the compute memory from the app service plan. App service plan goes ahead into the backend virtual machine, drives that particular compute power from the virtual machine, and goes ahead and fetches a request out here. Now, what is happening right now is that all your requests, all the 10 requests, all the 10 parallel requests that are happening, is going to the same virtual machine out here. See, even this virtual machine has a capacity, has a maximum load bearing capacity out here as such. Let's say that the virtual machine can at max handle about 100 requests in a given particular minute or a given second out here. It can handle 100 parallel requests out here as such. let's say let's say that my institute gets really popular and I'm getting about 1000 requests per a second, not 100 but 1000 requests per a second right now, which means that I am getting more requests that I have planned for than I have planned for. And this machine that is running in the background, right, it can fail or it will fail, and all your users can see an issue that, you know what, the server is unavailable and so on and so forth. The plan here just tells you S11, meaning the app service plan is running in the background with one instance of a virtual machine. It's one instance of a virtual machine out here as such. Now, I don't need one instance. Rather, to accommodate this particular load, I need three instances out here. And what I want to do is I want my app service plan, or I want the Azure portal to make sure that the requests are distributed equally among all these three machines. That's when I'm bringing a load balancer, which means now the traffic call is something like this. Multiple users are making a request. Multiple users are now, let's say, making a request out here. All the requests are going to the app service. App service is going to the backend app service plan. App service plan is reaching out to the load balancer. Load balancer is now going ahead and distributing this particular request out here and distributing all these things out here as such. This is what I actually, or this is what I'm actually planning to do out here as such. Again, creation of a virtual machine or creation of the app service or creation of the load balancer out here. This is not in my control. Reason being, this is where my control ends. This is the line where my control ends. It's a PaaS service in nature. But what Azure gives you an option is that Azure now gives you an option to do something known as a scale up, or rather a scale out. Let's see that. So I'm going into the app service plan, and as of now, the plan is S11, meaning one instance running in the background. This is also called as the number of workers. This is what we have seen while we're creating things in PowerShell, right? It's called number of workers out here. It's the worker, it's the node, or it's the number of instances of a virtual machine that are running in the background out here as such. And if you look at the plan, right, this plan, if you just scroll down, is capable to go to a maximum of 10 instances out here in the background. Meaning, not 3, but you can have 10 different virtual machines that are, let's say, helping this plan really run. And how can you do that? You need to go into a concept called, or you need to go into a concept called scale out. If I come here, right, I have something called manual scaling condition, and now I have an instance count here wherein I can set this out to a maximum of 10 instances. So let me put it at 3. Let me save this. What I'm doing right now is I'm scaling up my app service plan without paying the cost, which means that I'm simply paying the S1 cost only, which is around let's say 3,000 rupees or something. But I'm also scaling this up, which means that now let's see, if you go into your app service, just refresh this out, refresh this a couple of times, still scaling this up. Again, in the browser cache will also come into picture. So let's refresh this out here. And once refreshed, let's see what it really tells about. Now, do you see what is the instance count here? It is telling S1 colon 3, which means 3 instances of the virtual machine that are running in the background. And now you can also ask me a question that where is the load balancer? Not in your control. Azure platform or the Microsoft platform does an internal load balancing. You don't even have to configure a load balancer out here. All you need to configure is your app service and the number of instances that you need that are running in the background. That's it. Azure will take care of, let's say, how do you divert the traffic, which machine is free, and all the backend running algorithm is taken care by your platform or is taken care by the cloud provider out here as such. Yes, any questions till here? Anyone, any questions that I can take till here? Anyone, any questions, guys?
So that means the load balance will not come to in picture.
Yes, the load balancer will not even come to picture, which means that you cannot really manage the load balancer out here. It is completely taken care by the platform.
Increasing is scaling. You mean?
Sorry? I'm sorry, can you come again, please? I didn't get your question.
Okay. So that means it's the application which is scaling up.
Correct. Yes, correct. Yes, any more questions, guys?
What if, like example, I'm using one private web application, like private
Mm-hmm.
organization. We have some access to be denied, like we
Okay.
can't even go in that particular website.
Okay.
So there will be some blockage of the website, right?
Mm-hmm. When
Example,
you say, okay,
so
good, please.
yeah, so I can only go with the particular limitations of the, I can open only limitations of the application, not even about that. So is it
Mm-hmm.
a outbound or inbound, sir?
It would be inbound. It would always be inbound out here when you want to restrict it. Yes, any more questions here, guys? Okay, so now what I want you all to do is that there is a concept called auto scaling in app services. Azure App Service. Just go through this. What do you mean by an auto scale rule in Azure App Service out here? Just go, not App Service environment, sorry, let's go to App Service. Yes, set of features, capacities, and extra. Just go through this particular, let's say, setup out here. Tell or see what do you mean, or just go through this documentation and tell me what do you mean by something called as an auto scaling. Where do you find it? Again, if I go here, there are two different options for scaling. One becomes scale up. Scale up is to change the plan from S1 to P1, or let's say F1 to S1. It's called a scale up operation. Then you have something called scale out, and under the scale out condition, you have two different things out here that comes into picture. One, manual scale, the other, custom auto scaling out here. Please let me know what do you mean by a custom auto scale? How does it help you out here? And this is something that we will discuss in the coming session out here as such. Yes, any questions, guys, before I close? Anyone? Any questions that I can take before I close?
Sir, without the load balancer, how the incoming request will go to that particular virtual machine? We have 3 virtual machines here. Right?
Yes, so that is something which is taken care by your Azure platform. Meaning there is a load balancer that is running in the background. You cannot, let's say, really see it. You cannot, let's say, see how it is running and all that stuff. It's completely controlled by the platform. That's the reason we call all these things as platform services, platform managed services. So there is still a load balancing solution, but you're not able to see the load balancing solution like the way you're not able to see the virtual machines in the first place.
Okay. In case we want to get the IP of virtual machine, we have to go to the app service custom domain and we can see the IP
Yes,
address of
yes, yes. Any more questions, guys? Okay, thanks, guys, and have a good day ahead. Thank you. We'll meet tomorrow and we'll discuss more on this. Thank you.